Your phone is up. You're two places same time. We are going live. I went live, so you need to join together. Hey guys, you have a Medbix webcast. Wait for a few minutes. We are having some technical issues. Oh, music service is not currently available. It says so. Um, yeah, welcome to the Medbix webcast. This is Raman Anam Raju. I'm waiting for Roger to join. We are struggling with that. I don't know why, but sometimes happens. I see him. Camera is not there. Roger, the camera is missing. Roger, I see you, but you don't have the camera on. I can hear you now. Camera is not. Yeah, now I can see you. Very good.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly well.
All right.
Good. Oh my God, we achieved a big thing. Technology, what they say, Roger, before we talk about the glory of the technology, you see that what we went through, it is not a human understanding. You have to go through is not understanding the humans. It's a long way to go. Still, you have to follow certain steps and certain things, protocols, technical issues. It has to really understand the process and then join automatic. That is not doing it anyway.
Right.
Okay, let me. There's Raman Anamaraju. I'm the Medpix webcast host. I'm glad. Thank you all for joining. And this is a special good friend of mine for a long time, Roger Royce. I don't have too many loyal friends. He's one of the exception. So I know him a long time. He moderated a lot of my sessions. We're going to do in summertime, before summer, we're going to do a major healthcare summit. Roger is going to moderate that actually. You learned a lot. What's surprising thing is, let me tell you something about before I bring him. The surprising thing is that he learned quite a bit recently about healthcare. Even I was surprised how much he knows about healthcare nowadays. That's a very helpful particularly for doctors who are watching and everything. He understand the process and everything a little bit more. So Roger is a very institution in Silicon Valley. I met him almost the day I came in. I went to a meetup group and I met him. So he's a very well known in Silicon Valley. He's a startup attorney. Everybody knows his name. So if you want anything, all the doctors want to start up you wanted to finance your nephew or your brother-in-law or anybody that you want to invest, was consult Roger Royce. He is really good at that, and he can help you and guide you through the process here. He's extremely friendly and work through the process. Without further ado, Roger has excellent credentials. He is a bar. He is a very instrumental in doing a lot of things in California. He is an institution here actually in Silicon Valley. I have not met anybody who doesn't know Roger Royce. So Roger is a very well-known and established lawyer. Without further ado, let me introduce Roger to the desk. Welcome, Roger. Welcome, Roger.
Well, hi, Romanus. Thank you. It's good to be here. It's been a while since we've done one of these.
One of these days. Roger, can you explain your background a little bit? What do you do? Just overall to get familiar with the.
I would be happy to. So my name is Roger Royce. I'm a corporate partner with the law firm of Haynes and Boone. My office is downtown Palo Alto in the skyscraper on University Avenue, for those of you who live around here. It's 15 stories. That's a skyscraper in Palo Alto. And I do emerging growth and venture capital. So I work with startups and investment funds, formation, financing, M&A, commercial contracts, all in between. I tend to do quite a lot in agriculture technology. It happens to be a niche and an interest of mine because I am from an agricultural state. And over the last couple of years, I've gotten to do a lot more in biotech and medical and health tech generally, precision medicine, digital medicine, health tech broadly. The reason is we have a really broad health tech and biotech bench here at Haynes Boone, so I've got lots of support on the intellectual property side, and I've come to see a lot of companies, and I'm particularly interested in the sector of cancer therapy startups. And we've done two events now with panels and investors and scientists, et cetera, startup entrepreneurs, and a pitch event highlighting the some of the new therapies that are going to be coming online. And if I could spend a couple minutes, Ramon, I'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in fact, we'll be down in San Diego. I think it's AACR is that acronym, the Association for Advanced Cancer Research. We'll be down in San Diego in April doing our events down there as well. We were at the Society for Immunotherapy and Cancer last fall in San Diego. I'm looking forward to going back and getting the community to come out. And I've over the last couple of years, I've had occasion to understand quite a lot about cancer therapies. And what I've come to understand is that this is an area that is just, I think, just uniquely positioned for startups. There are really, really big game-changing ideas out there, big ideas, just completely different ways of thinking of things, completely different therapies that that seem to have some efficacy, and but they're risky. And they're so risky that it's hard to imagine that a lot of big public companies with shareholders to account to are going to swing for the fences. But that's what startups do, right? That's exactly what startups do. You swing for the fences, and you look for every 9 failures, you get one, spectacular home run. Maybe don't quote me on those stats, but you get the idea. So I think this is particularly well suited to startups, and we are squarely in the space on all the latest, greatest, newest stuff that's happening in cancer. And by that, I mean early detection. I've testified to the FDA on this. I've been quoted in the Wall Street Journal on early detection, as well as new immunotherapies, as well as some of the really new stuff in connection with cancer vaccines, which is getting more and more and more traction all the time. So stay tuned because we're going to do a lot more in that space. And that's how I think I come to your group, Ramona, is just through my connections in that space.
Yeah, Roger, that let me bring you both of us together. Roger, yeah, that cancer is one of the diseases that we are grappling with. I think whole world needs some kind of a solutions for this. We spend trillions of dollars on the cancer research. Now I think startups are the best ones that I probably could understand and probably potential solutions they can come up with. Cancer is not a one disease, they say, but I think it's one of the things we're going to be advancing immunotherapy that you're saying. That area is really fascinating. I'm going to present actually Indian Nobel Prize winners today in the evening, 6 o'clock. One of the gentlemen that they did was the ribosome. That's a molecule that does actually produces this immunotherapy
Mhm,
protein.
mhm.
So I think that is the future of the cancer therapies is going to be really radically changed. I think we need to have a control of the cancer situation. So it's not an investment alone. It's a wise investment. It's a very slick way. Understanding the process is intelligence is important in this one. Is a really think about it and what best to work. What do you think of? You met so many startup guys. What do you think? What do you see them in them that they could address this cancer problem, Roger?
Well, what I'm most excited about, honestly, like everybody else, is artificial intelligence and AI. And we've seen it now where in other types of diseases, the machine just always outthinks the doctors. And that's nothing against doctors, but like you said, cancer is a very complex set of diseases. It's never one thing. Typical tumor could have 50 mutations, maybe more, maybe 100, maybe a lot more. So, and they change and it dodges and weaves and bobs and weaves. And we're seeing lots of good AI that's being used for early detection, which as of this moment is still the best thing we've got for fighting this disease is early detection. But even beyond that, treatment. So the way that United States standard of care medicine treats this disease is to take a wild guess on which drugs, which chemotherapies might work for a little while. And it's almost never that they work forever and don't stop working. And it's oftentimes that they don't work at all. But the way we deal with it here is, you got a cancer, you figure out the organ of origin, and you just throw a standard set of chemotherapies at it, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Well, you know what, once we get some big data, and we've, by the way, we've got the technology now for tissue collection. We can sequence the genes, we can look at the mutations, we can get down to the molecular level, we can see which amino acids are out of place, right? So with artificial intelligence and big data, which you just can't get in the US, but with data, we'll be able to personalized medicine, tailor those therapies to a specific cancer. And I think that's the key. I think that's the key. That's what it's going to take, because otherwise it's just a crapshoot. We're just guessing.
I think it's one of the another area that artificial intelligence is going to be is going to be on steroids. If the quantum computer comes in the picture, the quantum computer is going to change the shift the gears for with the artificial intelligence, to crunch the humongous data, because the data is just out of the right now. Traditional computers cannot handle the data that they have. Even the fastest computer on the planet, IBM Summit, it is a 200 trillion operations it does, but still is a challenge for that. I think intelligence but let me ask you, go back to the startup scene. A lot of cancer startups, a lot of doctors, a lot of cancer oncologists, they watch my program. Actually, I'm interviewing tonight is a cancer oncologist, in fact. So let me. They have some ideas, but they don't know. That they don't understand technology very well. These doctors, and then they have some brother-in-law or nephew. He knows technology, but they don't understand the legal aspect of it. Where to start? What is the beginning places for these doctors? Think about a startup in this direction. Particularly, say, let us talk about cancer first. If they want to do a cancer startup, what is the typical requirement? What are the typical things you need for a doctor to start, for his nephew or for somebody, or on his own? What are the typical things, requirement for that?
Yeah, so I should say I'm a lawyer, not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I've probably already said something wrong and offended somebody out there, but I'm sure one of your oncologists will correct me if I did. So I'll just stick to my knitting for the rest of the night and talk about what I do professionally and for a living, and that's form companies, do financings, and do M&A. Now, with respect to, and I see this model that you're describing a lot, where you have a medical group, and in fact, it's not even in medicine. I see it in agriculture all the time too. But somebody comes up with something that works really well in their practice, right? Whatever it is they're selling, they found something that works really well for them, and they get the idea at some point that, hey, we could scale this. We could sell this to somebody else. We could make this available to everybody. And obviously, when it comes to disease, there's a real strong public interest in making that happen, and making that available and getting out into the market. In fact, I think that's going to be one of the challenges for AI, is how to, how are you going to assimilate everybody's competing data sets, and keeping sure the data is clean. But that's another issue. So anyway, so medical group comes along. They've got a really good idea. They think it'll scale. Well, here in California, of course, we got the Stark Act. Every doctor knows about that. It generally prohibits non-doctors from practicing medicine and having a financial interest in a medical practice. But there are exceptions. You could drive trucks through. I mean, it's usually not a big deal. We can usually structure around that if you're forewarned. I'm more concerned about things that are not the practice of medicine. I'm more concerned about the scalable aspect, which is going to be the solution itself, the technology. So let's use some examples.
Let us start this process. If it was sorry to interrupt you, Roger. Let us start with the process. If the doctor wants to start up, do you want a startup? What is the first thing he needs to do? What corporation in the United States, particularly? I will talk about the people from other countries now.
Yeah.
What do you suggest?
Well, let's take a step back before that. Even first of all, what is a doctor doing for a day job? Like everybody in the valley is a side hustle. We all know that. But the thing that makes it work, especially here in California, is that whatever this startup that the doctor is starting, if they're employed by somebody else, well, we don't want their current employer to claim that that's their technology that they've gone off and exploited and commercialized on their own. So number one is four things. Number one, they're going to have to develop this side business on their own time, right? Not when they're being paid by their current employer. Number two, they're not going to be allowed to use employer facilities. And that means not only labs, laboratories, et cetera, and test tubes and the obvious and microscopes, but even computers, right? Computers and phones. Don't do it because if you do, you cloud title to the IP and to the business. Thirdly, the thing that they're going to develop that they've discovered doesn't result from work performed for the current employer. So I think that's not as fuzzy as it sounds. I think we know if they're working on if they're giving somebody care and they come across some, they discover something, the employer may have an interest in that. And then finally, the fourth thing is the toughest one. Whatever they're doing really can't be too closely related to the current employer's business. And that's a fuzzy judgment standard, very fact specific. There's several cases in California on this. It goes all over the place, and that's the tougher one. So if we're not super clear on all of those, then what we want to do is we want to go back to the current employer and we want to get them to sign a waiver. And the employer will say, "Look, I understand you're doing this on weekends." And have at it. We disclaim any interest we have in that company and go do it. And I've had that happen many times. I sold a company about 2 years ago, very successful exit, somewhere in $100 million range. It's a software company. But the two founders worked for one of the largest software companies in the Valley. And they were smart enough to just go to their employer and say, "We want to do this on weekends. Are you okay with that? Would you please disclaim any interest in this for us? Otherwise, no one's going to finance it or buy it." And the current employer says, "Yeah, I like you guys. You're good employees. We don't want that business. Just as long as you don't interfere with your duties here, go for it." And they sign that waiver, and we're able to close that deal successfully. So that's number one.
So the
Okay.
physicians, if they're working for some kind of a group, they have to get even that group even though they won they're part of the partners on the group, they need to still get the waiver as a corporation. You need to get that waiver that you're
Yeah.
saying first thing.
Let me double click on that. So that's physicians who are employees of a group because there are shop rights here in California. So anyway, those are the standards under our labor code for physicians who are employees. Much different standard if they're partners. Okay, suppose they're partners in a medical group and they want to do something outside of that group. They owe fiduciary duties to their other partners. And one of those fiduciary duties is not to go off and take corporate opportunities that the current partnership could go exploit and do it on their own, unless there's something in their agreement, their partnership agreement, that allows them to do that. Now, when I draft these agreements, I always have language that lets people go do stuff on their own time. I just always do that, unless the clients say, "No, we want to lock them up tight to this deal." So look at your partnership agreement. Hopefully there's something in there that allows you to do stuff on your own time, and it ought to be pretty specific about what that is. Sometimes it's very narrow. You can do charitable nonprofit stuff, but everything else you have to do with us. And sometimes it's very broad. This is our business. Anything else, you're even allowed to compete. I've seen it drafted that way too. You can go compete with us if you want, just as long as because we'll adjust it, on our distributions or whatever. So that's one where you have to look hard at the agreements.
So a doctor wants to say is a partner. You still needs a fiduciary duty that you need to inform them what his plans are. So let me ask you, go back to the one step before that. If a doctor has an idea, that he
Mhm.
wants to, he should go for the patent first, or how does it proceed, or just first he approach the is a team, or is a partnerships or partners or his employer? Which one is the first one you need to do to do this process to before you open a corporation?
Well, it depends. If you're an employee, you follow the rules I said first. If you're a partner, you look at your agreements, and in either case, you can always get waivers. And I believe honesty is the best policy. Just go get waivers. Just tell people what you're doing on weekends. If they're good partners, they won't care. They'll let you go have your fun.
Okay.
Um, so then you come to the next step. Okay, we're off and running. We're allowed to do this. We talked a little bit about the regulatory aspect. Let's make
Correct.
sure that what we're going to do, because we're going to take on investors, and that's what I do. I do companies that are scalable. That means they're going to be C corporations formed under Delaware law. We can talk why that is, but it always is. And it's going to take on investors at some point who are not physicians. So, and then we're going to scale, meaning we're going to take this tech or this process or whatever it is, data set, whatever it is, and we're going to build it into something really valuable.
So,
Um, yeah.
let us go back to the Delaware part of it. Why you prefer the physicians is a good idea to open in Delaware?
Well, I got lots and lots of reasons, but at a high level, the number one reason is because that's what venture capitalists want to invest in. Okay. So then you might ask, well, why is that? And the reason why is because every venture capital deal is going to have under Section 214 of the code, Delaware Code, it's going to have these abrogation of class voting. And what do I mean by that? So let me give you an example. If you're a California company and you sell some common stock to your founders, which you always do, and you give some preferred stock to the investors, and now we have a potential sale come along. The common, and I saw this happen once. The common stockholders might have a teeny tiny percentage of the company, but we have class voting in California. Every class has to approve that sale. So the investors, even though they might own 90% of the company, 99%, they're kind of held hostage by the common. And the smart common people at that point will figure that out and say, "Oh, you want my vote? Well, write me a check." And that happens frequently. So in Delaware, you don't have that problem. You can provide in your organizational documents that we're not going to have class voting. Everybody's going to vote as a single class. So if the investors have more than a majority, then the investors win. Their vote controls. So that's the biggest reason. The other reasons are a little softer, less tangible, we'll say. Number one, everybody knows what a Delaware corporation is. It's got instant credibility all over the world and always has as long as I've been practicing, which has been a long time. The Delaware Secretary of State's office is infinitely easier to deal with than the California Secretary of State's office. It's faster, it's cleaner. We have a peer review process, they call that in California. So you might have to go convince some bureaucrat that you're doing it the right way. Delaware, you don't have that problem. So it's easier to deal with. In our website, it's still kind of a mess, if you ask me, in California. It's just hard to deal with our Secretary of State's office. Delaware doesn't have that problem. And then finally, I want to lead, because most people lead with this, so I want to mention it. Delaware has really good, clear law on commercial transactions. They got lots of case law, and they got a simple code, not like California's. California's got policy considerations all over the place. Delaware is very simple, straightforward, and clear, and they got case law where it's not. And you're allowed to do a lot in Delaware. For example, it's more of a system where whatever you agree to is what a court's going to enforce. Whereas California is a little more activist, right? You have a little less certainty as to what a court might do with your documents in California than you do in Delaware. So for all of those, especially on fiduciary duties, right? So for all those reasons, Delaware is the king of corporations.
So, you're saying so still, if the doctor is practicing in Texas, suppose, or is in Georgia or in California, still they need to open their local corporation again. That what is the relationship between the Delaware corporation? If you are functioning in the local home state, what is that relationship should be?
Yeah. So what we do is we'll form a company. Let's say you're operating in Texas, and we are a Texas-based law firm, by the way. I'm in Palo Alto, California, but my firm is headquartered in Dallas. But let's say we form your Delaware corporation because we think we're a candidate for venture capital at some point down the road. But we're doing business in Texas. So now what? We don't form another Texas corporation. What we do is we qualify the Delaware corporation to do business in Texas. We file a piece of paper with the Secretary of State's office, and then we get into the Texas system. And you do that pretty much in every state where you're doing business. And some are more aggressive about what doing business means than others. As you can imagine, California takes a very expansive view on what doing business means because they want you not only into the corporate net, they want you in the tax net as well.
Okay. Now, the next question is let us talk about intellectual property. The first thing, they need to go raise the money first, or they need to put their own money, or intellectual property, register the intellectual property IP to be done. Which comes first?
The chicken or the egg?
Chicken or the egg?
Yeah, here's how I like to think about it. The founders are going to have to put up a little bit of seed money. They're going to have some skin in the game. They're going to have to advance the costs of getting a company formed, doing some of the groundwork, maybe coming up with a minimal, proof of concept. Let me put it that way. Founders are going to have to come up with a beta, and maybe the founders got some close family members who got a lot of money, who are willing to contribute to the cause. And if that's the case, we'll do a small, early friends and family round. So the first thing that happens is the founders fund it with a little bit of money, not a lot, nothing crazy. Don't mortgage your house. Don't cash out your IRA or your 401k. I've been seeing people do it for 30 years. It's a way too risky for that. Use other people's money. So the founders will start and just get something that shows proof of concept, and then you can go to angels.
So intellectual property is not the first one. You have to raise the money from the family and friends, or their own money. They put it together first, right?
That's for sure. You got to get some money. Now, intellectual property. So I work with tech companies. That's almost all what I do. And on the intellectual property side, I think there's really two or three kind. Well, there's a lot of different kinds of intellectual property, but there's three kinds that are super important to a startup and super important to know about early. And so let's go through them one at a time. One is the one that we all know about, trademarks, right? And by the way, I have a podcast called 10,000 Startups, and we did a whole session on trademarks for startups. So you can find it in the Apple Podcast Store. Trademarks are very important because most companies are building a lot of goodwill around their name, and they want to make sure they have rights to use that name. And so it's really, really important that a company makes sure it has the rights to use it and then protects it. And also if they have a logo. And that's an easy thing to do. It's an easy thing to do, but it's disastrous if they don't. Because just imagine if you're going along for years and years under a certain name and logo, then all of a sudden you can't use it anymore. Your customers are gone. Yeah, I suppose you could reach out and say you're changing your name and please stay with me, but I don't know. Will they? You tell me. I mean, would Snapchat be Snapchat without that name? I don't know. So I think trademark is super important. Second, and this is another one everybody knows about, patents, right? That's expensive. There's no doubt about it. I can't sugarcoat that. Now, you can do a provisional patent, and that buys you a year at a time, and you can do that at minimal expense. But eventually, you're going to be spending money on patents. And patents will increase the value of your company. They just will. Investors like patents. A patent, as you know, is really a right to exclude others from using your invention, right? So you secure your rights to the invention. That's what we mean by ownership, being able to keep other people from using it, right? Like this desk is mine only because I can keep you from coming over here and sitting at it. So that's ownership. And then thirdly is trade secret. And all of my startups, tech or not, have a pretty extensive trade secret portfolio. And trade secret is really just any sort of design process. It's basically it's information that's secret and it's valuable, and you take steps to keep it that way. And where people mess up on trade secret is the third part, taking reasonable steps to keep it secret. During COVID, you might recall there was a company that lost its trade secret protection because it did a Zoom call and it didn't understand how to use the controls. So they opened it up to the public and they had all of their slides with trade secrets up there.
I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, took the company down, I think. But it was the court, and this went in front of a court, and the judge said, "Look, you have to try to keep it secret. And if someone steals it from you, that's different. We're not going to deny you trade secret protection, but if you disclose it, even inadvertently, like that, you may lose your trade secret protection." Okay, so those are the three kinds. Would you like to talk about strategy?
Yeah, so what about NDAs? So anybody that you are dealing with, let us talk about NDA 1 minute.
Yeah, NDAs, so
Non-disclosure
non-disclosure.
agreements. Yeah.
Yeah. So people, I put NDAs in two categories. One is just a naked non-disclosure agreement. You just have people sign something, and you need this for your trade secret. That's number one. If you disclose it to somebody, and if you don't have them sign an NDA, well, they're free to go off and tell the world about it, and then boom, your trade secret status is lost. So the first thing you do to take reasonable steps to protect your trade secret is have them sign an NDA that says, "I will not disclose this thing you're telling me about to anybody else without your consent." There's another type of NDA. It's really an invention assignment, but people kind of use the term loosely, and that's a little different. That's where not only am I not going to disclose it, if I do some work on this and I make it better, if I come up with new features and new inventions, they belong to you and not to me, even though we're working together on this. That's also super important for a company protecting its trade secrets.
So the NDA, there are two kinds of NDAs. There, that trade secret is a part of that
That's one
also.
way of looking at it. And then there's a million kinds of NDA. I mean, you get into it. I mean, it's sort of standardized. I mean, no one should ever negotiate NDAs. I mean, the language is kind of standard, but it could be mutual, where both parties agree to keep each other's secrets, confidential. Or it could be one way where, look, I'm disclosing, you're not, so you promise me you're not going to tell anyone. And then the third thing I mentioned is not really an NDA; it's an invention assignment, but it's very closely related. So I like to talk about it.
So let us talk. Let us finish the NDA part. Is clear. What about the next step? Is doctor puts his own money? How does he protect himself? Even though if he is a nephew, he is a brother-in-law, or his own son, is there any protection there, or what are the things he needs to follow certain protocols in that direction?
Well, the number one most important thing, and by the way, I'm going to come back to strategy, IP strategy, before we finish. But on your
Okay.
question, number one, the most important thing is that they get it in writing, whatever he decides. So yeah, founder is going to put some money in. That can go in as their contribution. That can go in as a loan. That can go in as a convertible debt that's going to convert into preferred at closing. It can go in as just an advance that they're going to get. It could go in a lot of different ways. Whatever it is, maybe it goes in for additional common stock. Whatever it is, make sure you get it in writing, because otherwise you created this big fuzzy ambiguity. And if there's one founder, it's no big deal. But if there's more than one founder, you're setting yourself up for a dispute, and investors do not like disputes.
Very good. So everything has to be documented, at least for some kind of a communication document. Are there, you're talking about IP strategy, for example. I want to go back to that. Is there any by default some company I have, if suppose I invented something, is by default I have some rights on the intellectual property?
Um, well, yeah. I mean, yes, that's the problem. I mean, if you contribute to something and if you create it,
Yes.
um, you may be the owner unless you've got an agreement in place, or if you're an employee that says you're not. And the real problem we have is with employees, it's less of an issue if you're employing somebody and you want to, the law will fill in some of the blanks. With contractors, it's harder because with contractors, you got to look at their agreements. And if you don't have an agreement with the contractor, um, they may have a non-exclusive license to whatever they built for you, and they may be free to go out and sell it to somebody else or disclose it to somebody else. You got to have good documentation. You got to have good paperwork.
Now the tax season is coming up for doctors. They want to save money. We sell equipment. I used to sell equipment to the doctors, MRI, CT scan, ultrasounds, because they can save the tax, your depreciation effect. So let us talk about, you're an expert in tax attorney. Tell us a little bit about that, how they can save the taxes on by investing in the startups.
Yeah. Well, so there was a time when we used to form startups as pass-through entities, S corporations or LLCs, and I still do once in a while. And that was because there's one level of tax on a pass-through and on a what they call a C corporation, which is what 99.9% of these startups are formed as, at least in my neighborhood, uh, and the majority everywhere. You have two levels of tax: tax on income at the corporate level and tax on the shareholders when they get a distribution of that income. However, a couple of things. Number one, startups almost never have income at the corporate level because they should be reinvesting their earnings and building a big goodwill asset. So less of an issue. But number two, this is really significant: qualified small business stock, QSBS planning. Now, here's the thing: only a C corporation can issue qualified small business stock. An S corporation cannot. An LLC cannot. It's got to be issued to you by a C corporation. So, so that's number one. Okay, well, why do we want this stuff? Qualified small business stock. Well, I'll tell you why. It's because if you can hold qualified small business stock for 5 years or more and then sell, you can exclude up to $10 million or 10 times your cost of that stock from any federal tax at all. Any federal tax at all. That is a huge benefit. You just think about that. A zero rate of federal tax.
Really?
So, yeah, and even if you as founder aren't thinking that far ahead, I promise you, your investors are. They're going to ask you for representations about it. They're going to make sure. It's such a giveaway. It really is. So yeah, and there are other requirements to be QSBS. I mean, the business has to be worth less than $50 million on a tax basis at the time of investment. Not really a problem for my startups. It has to be. It can't be here's a good one. It can't be a professional services business. You could incorporate your medical practice, and I couldn't incorporate a law firm and sell QSBS. So sometimes we push up against that line. Is this a consulting company or is it a product company, etc.? But in any event, we want to preserve that. And step number one is to be a C corporation.
So C corporation is a good one to start with. That is, by all means, you prefer that because they can get the tax benefits also. You're saying federal tax benefits are there for the C
Right.
corporation that you
That's
don't
right.
bring on other ones. So let us
That's
start
right.
with the raising money. So the doctor is putting in his own corporation or somebody else corporation. What is the vested way that he can invest? That what is the best way to invest the money? What are the terms? And you always talk about. I hear you a lot of times talking about the vested. Go by step investment rather than putting everything on right one check.
Stage.
That's
Yeah,
what they
stage.
do. A lot of doctors do that actually, and they cry after that. I know so many doctors did that actually. It is it's tragedy, in fact.
Yeah. No, we stage investments. That's the right way to do it. In other words, because once in a while someone will come in and they'll say, gee, I'm going to raise $50 million right out of the gate. I don't ever want to have to go spend my time raising money. And the answer is, first of all, no, you're not. But even if you could, you wouldn't want to. You'd have to give 90% of your company away to the very first investor.
Yeah.
And if you stage that $50 million, you end up with more stock at the end because you take the investment only as much as you need to get to the next valuation point, and that should be 1 year and 2 times value, right? That's just use that as your starting point and aim for that. And then at that valuation point, you take the next money at a higher valuation, you give away less of the company, so you, the founder, hang on to more. So that's staging the investment. Now, now that's getting a little ahead of us because we got the founder, we skipped a big step. Got the founder money, we got to talk about the angel money. How's that going to come in?
Okay.
So imagine you've got a company, you just started it, the founder has put in, several $1,000s just to kind of get the ball rolling. And now we're ready to go talk to some real angels, and you solicit their investment. Well, we would almost always do the first pre-seed round until you get up to millions of dollars. We would do that as what we call a convertible instrument, convertible security, a safe that you talked about, simple agreement for future equity, or convertible debt. Beyond that, we would do what we call a priced round, which is where we sell equity. Now, why do we do that? Number one, it's fast, cheap, and easy. Number two, you don't have to value the company because it's going to be really hard to value an early startup. You don't have revenue, you don't have patents yet, you don't have a lot of headcount. It's really hard to value. So instead, we sell them a safe, which is or a convertible, which basically says, look, you give me the money today, and when we do sell preferred stock to a professional investor in a priced round, we're going to convert the money you gave me today into that stock. And you know what? We're going to sweeten the pie. We're going to do it at a discount. All right. So for every $80 you give me, you get $100 worth of stock or something like that. And then secondly, so if you think way ahead, or if you've been through this, you'll be thinking that, oh, okay, company. So let's say we got a $10 million price cap. That means that no matter what your next financing is, right, I get a $10 million valuation. Why do we want that? Because if you think about it, the startup is using the investor's money to build value. So the startups, and that investor is going to convert that money into stock at some future value. So you can kind of see that the startup's using the investor's money to work against the investor. And we solve that problem, like I said, by a valuation cap. We say, look, suppose you put your money in now. We have a $10 million valuation, and let's suppose we finally do a financing, and the company's worth $40 million at that time. We don't want you saying, oh man, I really screwed up. I should have taken stock back then when a company is worth $1 million instead of now I got to take stock when it's worth 40 million. I'm getting a much smaller piece. So no matter what happens, we say with a valuation cap, we're going to give you stock as if the company were worth $10 million at that point. Or we'll give you no less stock than what you would get if it were worth 10 million. That's a valuation cap. So that's how the early money always goes in these days.
Let us talk about safe agreement a little bit. So from the point of view, if a doctor wants to invest in through the safe instrument, is that what he needs to look for? What is the safe, kind of things that he needs to do that? I will ask the second other part of the agreement. If he is himself raising money through safe, what is it? So you need to give me both scenarios here.
So SAFE is a simple agreement for future equity. And I have to give you a little bit of the evolution of this. So before the SAFEs, it used to be that people would sell convertible notes, meaning that the investor would loan the company money, and that loan would automatically convert into stock at some point in the future when the company sold preferred stock. But it had to carry interest, and because of banking regulations, it had to be short term. So companies oftentimes.
Excuse me. You said that safe agreement has to carry interest. You have to have they have to have interest.
Convertible notes do. Convertible notes do. Safes don't. That's why we started using safes, because somebody eventually figured out that, well, wait a minute, I'm not doing this for an interest return, for a debt return, 6% of my money. I'm taking equity risk. I want more than a 6% return. So let's just get rid of the interest. That's not what I'm after. So now we have a note that bears no interest. Okay, I'm with you so far. But then the second piece is, and plus, I don't expect to be repaid unless this company does another financing. Because if it doesn't do an equity financing, there's not going to be any money to pay me. So let's get rid of the part that says there's a term on this. Well, now we no longer have debt. We have what I think is a prepaid forward contract. But for tax purposes, most people will take the position as equity. But whatever it is, we got the money. We don't have to pay interest. We don't have a deadline, and we're going to convert it down the road.
So if he's one of the best ways to do. If I'm raising money through the safe, is a much easier, and then even the doctor is putting the money through the safe is also protected. It's a very good instrument. You mean to say that a new kind of instrument is a very good
investing now. It depends on who I'm representing. So if well, for if your the company is safe, especially what they call a pre-money safe, is a very favorable instrument for the company, right? Because they don't have to pay interest, they don't have to repay the safe if they don't get an additional funding or sell the company or something.
It's called pre-money safe. It's called
Yeah,
pre-money safe.
pre-money safe. The Y Combinator safe is post-money, which
Oh.
is investor favorable. Well, what's the difference? The difference is how you calculate the percentage that they get. With a post-money safe, that's at a high level. Just ignore stock option plans and things like that. At a high level, uh, a pre-money safe is going to get diluted by all the other safes that you sell after that. A post-money safe is not. So theoretically, we could sell somebody a post-money safe that says, look, you're going to get 10% of this company, or let's say 1% of this company post money after all the other safes that we sold are in place. Okay, well, what if you sell $1 billion worth of other safes? Now your $10,000 is turned into 1% of $1 billion, right? That's an extreme, crazy example, but you get the idea. With a pre-money safe, it says, you're investing at a valuation. It's like the VCs would invest, as if you got equity today at this value. And any money we take after today, that's going to dilute you just like it dilutes the founders. So you don't know what percent you're going to get when we convert. You can't know until we know how many safes we're going to sell. Now, investors will say, gosh, I like the post money safe because I want to know what percent of this company I'm buying. And companies will say, I don't like that because I think you should get diluted along with me for later money. So, again, so if I'm representing the company, I want a pre money. If I'm representing the investor, I want a post money. And I've got arguments and counter arguments all over the place for which one is better. But just kind of a rule of thumb,
Uh,
if you expect your company to do that equity financing like fairly soon, like it's a bridge loan, a loan that bridges between different rounds, then it doesn't matter. Post money, pre money, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be out that long. You're not going to take that much money. On the other hand, if you're like a lot of startups I know that just goes on for years and years and years and keeps selling safes after safe after safe, just money comes trickling in and trickling in at all different valuations. Well, then the pre money is going to be better for you.
yeah.
So,
So your safe is a good instrument. You are saying for the particularly technology startups or cancer startups, even safe is a good instrument to start with. That's what you're saying. Is that? Can I take
right.
that? Okay. Now let us talk about the once they raise money, safe they got the money, and what are the co-founder? They need to hire a co-founder, a technology partner, or particularly doctors needs to hire a technology partner or the co-founder. Is it better to hire a company or better to hire a technology co-founder, an individual? Tell us that. How does it work in the co-founder business?
Well, every well, not every, but most successful startups I've worked with have had co founders. And because I do tech startups. And the reason why is that it's kind of a rare individual that can do it all. I'm not saying they
Mhm.
don't exist, I'm saying it's rare. And you have to convince an investor that you are that rare individual if you do it that way. But usually there's somebody who's got deep technological expertise, and you got someone else who's got domain expertise, who understands the industry and the market and what you're getting into and why there's a need. And sometimes you have a third person who's a business person who just understands business and has done startups before. Um, you could have one person that can do it all, I suppose, but usually not. Now, if you are going to have co-founders, it's infinitely easier to put them in at the start of the company and not try to add them later. If you try to add them later after that company's built a little value, you could easily have a taxable event when they come in to that co-founder, and that's not good. They're not going to like that. So I tell people, kind of, get your ducks in a row. Then
Hmm.
incorporate. Don't wait too long. You got to, if you wait too long, people are going to change their minds as to what they think they're entitled to.
So let us talk about the next step is you raised the angel funds. It became a very successful company. What about the VCs? The next going to the VCs. Can you give us a little bit about the Series B? That's what they call right here, Series B and the A. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different ballgame, of course, when you start talking to venture capitalists. But you'll go there. Really, you could go there at Series A. meaning that you need money to scale. You showed that people will, proven a concept, you've gotten your beta out the door, you showed that people will actually pay you for the product. And now you need money to scale that. Usually it's to build out the tech and to get into the market and give a lot of money to Google Ads so you can go scale. Okay, I get that. And that's going to take, say you need somewhere between $3 and $10 million. Now you're in VC territory. And so you'll go, it's probably a smaller fund at that point. So you'll go to the venture capitalist and they are going to want to do a price round, meaning they're going to want to buy equity, specifically preferred stock. And that's equity ownership of the company with all sorts of rights and preferences. And I do a whole hour podcast about this, but you can break it down into two types. One is economics and one is control. On the economics, these days, it's always 1x non-participating is what we call that, meaning their preferred stock is going to convert into common down the road, so they get their pro rata share. If I have 1,000 shares of preferred, there's 10,000 shares outstanding, I'm going to have 10% of the company, right? Or they get their liquidation preference, 1x, meaning they get their money back, the amount that they invested. So they'll take the greater of those two. That's how the economics typically are structured. And there's a lot of other details we don't have to get into.
Let us now, we are coming to end. Almost hour we spoke. Let us review the little bit of the from the point of a doctor as an investor. There are 5 steps here saying open a corporate. If they wanted to start their own company, doctors, they should start in the Delaware. That's what you're saying. The Delaware corporation is the best, safest. To raise money, once they put the money, and then they should have a co-founder in the beginning itself, rather than bringing the later stages, right? So correct me if I'm wrong. Then third one, you're saying that when you put the money, document everything. The trade secrets are very extremely important here, and then get all the clearance from your employer, employees, employer, and partners. That upfront. That is the one thing you said. Then when you go to the market and they raise the money. So we need to talk about the raising money through the family and friends. Is that it has to be accredited investors or anyone can put the money there?
Did you say accredited?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be depending on the size of the financing, but you want it to be. You really want it to be. And accredited means it's a net worth or a net income requirement. Either $1 million in net worth your investor has to have if it's an individual, excluding personal residence, or they have to make $200,000 a year, $300,000 jointly with their spouse for the current and the past 2 years. Now you want them to meet that standard. If they don't, you still have a securities law exemption where you can raise money from them. And I don't want to dive into the detail, but as a general rule, you can have a few of those on your cap table, but you really don't want to because it's such a hassle. For example, if you raise too much money or if you have too many unaccredited investors, you may have to create a PPM, a prospectus, an offering document, provide tons of information. That's very expensive. Secondly, you have to think what's going to happen down the road. When your company gets acquired, you don't want to create problems for an acquirer. And sometimes we see a company with a bunch of unaccredited investors and wants to get sold in a stock for stock deal. Well, now your acquirer is issuing stock to unaccredited investors, and they might just not want to. They might not want to have them on their cap table. So I really discourage people from doing that. And plus, we get state blue sky laws. Depending what state they're from, we might run into state problems with that. It's usually just a notice issue. But nevertheless, I say these days that standard for an investor is so low. Now, if you are going to take a bunch of unaccredited investors, do crowdfunding under Reg CF. And we could do a whole hour on crowdfunding.
Yeah, I think we should do the next session. I want to do the crowdfunding, the rules and regulations. He can talk about that. Roger, let us give me a summary of the whole thing. If a doctor is an investor or doctor wants to start his own company, where to start? And the corporation is a legal corporation. You're giving a 5 steps. So let us say 5 steps. It's to open a corporation in the legal C corporation if he wants to on his own company. then invest his own money there, and then seed capital, and raise money through his friends, and then get all the clearances from his partners. Particularly, a lot of doctors are partners or their employees, so they need to worry about that part. Third thing is that what you're saying is that you accredited investors, and you got to watch out that one. Fifth one is tax benefits are there for the C corporation. Then when you go to the venture capitalist, you need to, for all this process, you need a lawyer. Safe, you need a lawyer. So tell me, how do they reach you, and what is the best way to reach you, Roger?
Um, yeah, I'm not hiding. I'm all over the internet. On our website, haynesboone.com, or you can always email me at roger.royce@haynesboone.com. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to link with you. And I don't mind talking to anybody. I see new startups all day, every day. So happy to talk more.
Okay. So this is a exciting talk. So Roger, a busy day. You took it. Thank you for coming on the show. It is a very valuable. You are one of the most reliable and the most trusted attorney that I. He always consistently gave a lot of great advice to the doctor physicians. I think I highly recommend to follow Silicon Valley attorney, because particularly technology startups, they are mature here. They understand things. If I go to Alabama or anything, I'm not saying they don't know, but he's the genesis, the epicenter of the startups is the Silicon Valley. So Roger is in the middle of that epicenter. So he would be excellent person to guide you all the process. So Roger Royce at Haynes, what is the name? Haynes and Booth,
Haynes,
right?
Haynes and Boone.
Yeah.
Haynes Boone, Boone. Haynes and Boone.
I will replay this once a few times, and then if people actually ask questions on the LinkedIn, you can answer them directly there. But anyway, thank you for coming, Roger. It's
My
truly an
pleasure.
honor and privilege. Always, you're a great friend, and you're truly a champion for the startups.
Okay, thank you. Bye now.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.